Alfredo Cramerotti,
Yeah.
curator of the video section of Expo Chicago. You did a great job. It looks fantastic.
Thank you.
I'm sure you had some tremendous challenges along the way in terms of compiling such a range of videos.
Yes, it was actually quite. It was quite a long one in terms of researching and getting through a huge amount of artists. Actually, I researched all the artists represented by the galleries, and there are 140 galleries in the fair. So, and at least 3 to 5 artists every gallery doing work with film, video, or moving images. It could be actually digital technology or apps, for instance. And I took it as a sort of a curatorial exercise, and I went through all of them. For me, it was important to go through it and take the temperature in a way. Where is the moving image sort of a sector now? Getting a state of things and understanding what are the trends actually building up, for instance, and shaping in the future, and how they build on an existing tradition.
Did you find that there are trends like this little fragment of time that artists are exploring a specific realm of interest?
There are some of them actually, and I was interested specifically, which could be one of the trends really, to this or this creative edge, let's say it, between the cinematography, which can exemplify in the cinematography of the Hollywood film, for instance.
So the traditional narrative.
The traditional narrative of the feature film, and the more sort of experimental narrative and structure of the artist film. I wanted actually to explore this creative edge. So the selection has been built based on either artworks who used a very structured and precise feature film cinematography, so using the Hollywood type of cinematography, but delivering a content which is very experimental. Or on the contrary, works who actually are using a very free-form experimental narrative structure, but with some sort of a cinematography content in terms of narrative. So this kind of a balance, this ballooning between the narrative, the content, and the form. That was interesting actually, and how they actually impact on each other, and how some of the Hollywood cinematography are kind of a trickle down into the artist's work, and equally how actually an artistic approach actually that they kind of respond back somehow, and they back up to the more kind of a mainstream cinema.
Well, historically, to your point, film has always been influenced by artists in some way. That when you look back historically, you see how a director used the scope of framing,
Absolutely.
of cutting, and so on and so forth, which is in large part due to the artists exploring that back in.
Absolutely. Always kind of a heart has been kind of a pushing the edges somehow,
Yes.
any sort of established discipline somehow, and then the moving image is not different from it in that sense, based on an artistic approach to the moving image. So you don't have actually the prologue and the development and the epilogue, actually, but you have a much more kind of a non-linear type of narrative.
Right, non-linear narrative.
Yeah.
How do you feel that how space impacts the curatorial aspect of what you do? In other words, presenting certain works in environments which you don't always have control, or they're designed specifically for a venue.
Well, you have to take it on board, and I think as a curator, I always start from putting myself in the shoes of the viewer when staging an exhibition or a film program like this one. So you have to take into consideration the viewer experience when they enter a space or they are in a certain situation, and what is their kind of impact.
How they experience it.
How they feel it, how they experience the art you show to them, and how they actually can respond to the art, how they interact if it is actually it's intended in that way, and also how to take on board the space. and make the most of it. And to me, it's quite a crucial point in terms of curatorial work.
Activation of the space.
It is the activation of the space, is also the activation of the viewer.
Seeing something on a small thing is one kind of an intimacy versus on a 20-foot screen.
Exactly, and having an experience of a film in a cinema setting or in a gallery setting is a very different thing than on an art fair, for instance, or
Very
your
much.
living room. In this case, for instance, that helped me to structure the two loops for the two screening rooms. So I wanted to have pieces not longer than 15 minutes. In principle, I know that in an art fair, people don't spend actually, 4 hours.
Give yourself that certain parameter.
It's unthinkable really in this context. So it's much more coming in and go in and out, and having a chipping and then chipping out, and then having a shot maybe, and then maybe going back to the day after if you're here for 2 or 3 days.
Right. Which most people probably are.
And most people are actually. And another parameter was not to have loops who are actually too long, and you have to keep an eye on the sequences of the work you're presenting in the two screens.
Because it becomes one thing.
Of course. So how do you actually select the work in the sequences of the work?
It's like with two-dimensional work, hanging a red painting next to a blue drawing or whatever, does it work?
But actually you have to take in consideration the content of the work and the aesthetics, for instance, of the work, and how it flows, and the sound of the work, and to alternate pieces more aggressive maybe to pieces which are a bit more contemplative, or pieces that actually have a certain type of aesthetics, and to the next piece that can maybe pick up some elements of those aesthetics and they kind of develop in another form or in another way. And it's all consideration that you have to see the pieces and the works in order to create a narrative in the viewer experience.
That's what I was going to say. So even non-narrative work becomes narrative.
It is actually. You have to create a show in the viewer's minds.
Right. There's a sequence of time no matter what you say.
Absolutely. And then there are a number of works which I not shown actually in neither of the screening rooms, and
Right,
I
you have
put
the
them on the
pods.
pods because they were works they were actually much better and enjoyable actually in a kind of a one-to-one
Right,
type
a more
of
private-ish.
one-to-one
The more
setting.
intimate kind of
or
works.
one, for instance, is a beautiful hypnotic piece in black and white on a slow motion, and it's 10 minutes and it's silent. And it doesn't really make sense to put that one in a loop with other film, because nobody will stay there for 10 minutes when they expect to have this kind of loop with stories, for instance. So you create another type of environment for that work. I decided to select one work each pod because I wanted to give a sort of a special viewing situation for that work.
You also chose some student work.
Yes, and the students graduates from Columbia College submitted by the tutors. And I selected 2 of them. They do have a very structured approach. Almost all of them, actually, the submission, they were very cinematographic. There is a precise narrative with a beginning, a center point, an ending, and the precise characters, precise stories. You can actually feel the story, the story writing behind it. And the 2 I selected actually are 2 work which they do have this cinematographic structure in a way and aesthetics, but the content they deliver is quite experimental.
How do you feel the current digital realm in terms of all the content online? Does that open up possibilities for artists that are more interested in video-based, moving image, non-static work?
Definitely, I do think that the digital it's really an opportunity rather than a limitation in that case.
Right, because you have this giant platform out there to share content.
And to give you a concrete example, actually, one of the work I selected, it's not a film or a video, it's an app, which is by Stan Douglas. And I came across this app quite by chance, really. A small article and the QR code, and so I kind of downloaded on my iPhone. And then actually, my son, who's 9 now, he asked me actually to see what it was, and then I went through with him. It's actually a very cinematographic experience, and it almost presented for him is almost like a game that you play on your smartphone. But actually, it's a very defined cinematographic experience because it's Vancouver in 1948. and with starting with an aerial view of Vancouver and zooming in, and you have two different situations, the Hotel Vancouver and the Halley, and then you can go into one or the other, and you have this kind of a fantastic way of exploring the city through your fingers, really, through the interaction with the interface, and you have the soundtrack. And according to where you are, actually there are a different type of soundtrack. It was a huge kind of undertaking in terms of production, because there are actually 150 people that work on that app. Really, really complex, actually, in a way.
So it's like making a film. Or
It
making
is
an immersive
actually
experience.
absolutely, and it's a cinematographic experience, but delivered in the form of an app, and not in the form of a video or in the form of a film. And that's why it is in the program.
Right.
Well, you've created a very enjoyable experience here at Expo Chicago. Could you tell us about anything that you have in the near future that you'd like to talk about? A project that's exciting you want to share with us?
Yes, I have actually a project now going on in Vienna, which I opened actually last week, which is a small show about art and capitalism. Aptly so, because we are in an art fair, I think it actually makes sense to talk about it.
Very appropriate. Yes, absolutely.
And the idea was we're responding to a critical text of a philosopher, a German philosopher, Armen Abbasian, and the show that I put together actually is with 5 artists, and they have kind of an oblique take on the idea of art and economy. And some of them are working with the aesthetics of the economy, scientific idea of the capitalist system, so that the research and the scientific approach actually to the capitalist system, and making a parallel between let's say a natural phenomenon like the expansion of the universe with a cultural phenomenon like the expansion of the markets, the idea of the economy of time. So there is a room there actually in which I explore the idea of the economy not through monetary value but through time value. And then a show for the institution I direct in Wales in the UK, Mostyn, and there's a show opening in November by Django Hernandez. I'm doing a solo show with him, and his work is very much about an idea of space islands, but also time islands. How do we actually define this kind of idea of community and sharing of interest and sharing of passion and activities, not only in space, as we do it now here in an art fair, for instance, but also in time, when you gather extra spontaneously because there is something. And it could be a music festival or a funeral or kind of an art exhibition. And so you have this kind of an element that bringing together a number of elements, people, process, and you create some sort of a mini community that it has a specific purpose. And then it dissolves that community.
Right, the people...
Yeah, it's like a temporary autonomous zone in a way, and then you create it one and it dissolves it and it goes away. So it's installations, sculpture, also two-dimensional objects.
Excellent.
So you've got your hands full.
Very exciting. I want to thank you for taking time and chatting with us. It's really enjoyable.
Thank you.
Alfredo, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great time here in Chicago.
Yes, I will.